Hello everyone, welcome again to HORRORific Reviews. My images just went, that's fantastic. Here we go, great start. Anyway, never changes with this thing, always some drama or other. So tonight we're going to talk about Moloch, just recently released there in Shudder, I think during the week, watched it last night. All in all, enjoyable movie. Few bits and pieces, like most of them. Bit of trying to tie it up. It's not just a walk through, paint by numbers, jump scare type horror movie. A bit more to it. Funny thing before I begin, I was going through the reviews and Shudder. Don't worry, if you're on the platform, basically somebody watches a movie, you can leave a review and give it a skull star, out of 5, review. Most of them pretty positive, but what was quite funny were the 1 stars, and there were the same people going, "This movie said it would be in English, but it wasn't. There was other languages as well, and I'm confused." And I just thought that was absolutely hilarious, because I've watched loads of foreign language movies over the years. I prefer when they're subtitled as opposed to dubbed, because I think it's difficult to get across, like when somebody's voicing over another person's acting. I think it's difficult to actually get the feel of that moment. I grew up, watched loads of like Hong Kong movies. Bruce Lee, massive fan of his. Growing up, Jackie Chan movies, before he went to Hollywood. Loads of those sort of things. Jared Depardieu was one of my like funniest comedians growing up. A lot of his movies, they were in French. There's something about somebody speaking in their native tongue, and you just catch on, reading the subtitles. It takes a wee bit of skill as well, I think. If you're not used to it, you have to pay attention, and you're kind of watching the screen, and you kind of have to keep an eye on the subtitles as well, or learn the language if you're that way inclined. I'm terrible at languages, so I don't. So with that being said, that seemed to be the major complaint from the audience. Now, I think critics are kind of iffy, some really for, some really against the movie, but then you kind of wonder with critics, do they go out of their way to better be super positive because they're access media and they're trying to get, in with the directors and stuff, or super negative to be, anti whatever or edgy? I don't get it, I don't read a lot of reviews. I find video reviews like this actually better. I'd rather watch someone review a movie, because I think there's something about being in front of the camera and putting your face out there where it brings a bit more honesty. Where someone who just types a review, you never see their face and they hide behind articles. Sometimes you use pseudonyms and everything else. I think that's where you get a bit of the vitriol from them, and that's why they think they have a license to like really pan things, or just they make it about something else than the actual movie. It's I don't like a lot of so-called online journalists. Tricky one. But all in all, I enjoyed this movie. Now, it's one of those ones you have to pay attention. You need, the plot doesn't get revealed straight away, and there's a particular scene that if you don't watch and pay attention to the story, then you lose it. You lose the whole meaning of what's going on, why it's happening, and it could be a blink. Not so much a blink because it goes on for a few minutes, but if you're not invested in what's going on, unless I'm talking about the school play because it's set in a village, but I'll give you a quick rundown of the synopsis. Beatrix lives in the edge of a peat bog in the north of the Netherlands. When she and her family are attacked by a random stranger one night, Beatrix sets out to find an explanation. The more she digs, the more she becomes convinced she's been haunted by something ancient. Like I said, it was released in Shudder. It was directed by Nico Van Brink, and the main character is Sallie Harmsen. Sallie Harmsen. Apologies if I'm butchering that, but it's not a name I'm familiar with. Funny thing, I did look her up because I keep mentioning that she was in like modern movies. She was in Blade Runner, 2049, the sequel. She played the replicant. That weird scene with you call that idiot. Played the villain, Jared Leto. I cannot stand that bloke. Just the look of him is way. But you know what weird pointless scene if you've seen Blade Runner where she's a replicant and he just fucking kills her for no reason, just to show that he's the bad guy. You know, that was a horror confusing movie. I know it's not horror, sci-fi, but that was another one. I still don't know whether I enjoyed the movie or not. I know it sounds weird, but you're still scratching your head going, was this actually, did it need to happen? You know, that sort of thing with a sequel. Did it need to happen? Did it serve any purpose? Did it further the lore? And could it go any further than that? Or was it just an art piece, you know, of, oh, look, I've got some money to do something, here's my thing. Let me know in the comments, of course, what you think. Don't mind me, a Saturday night, I'm going to have a little beer while we're doing this, because just hanging out. Actually, better change the chat thing just in case somebody turns up. You never know, somebody might turn up at the same time. I know I do this at strange times for not around the world, but and people are busy, but there you go, it's just after 9 here. Nice way to finish off a Saturday and then back to the grindstone. But yeah, this starts out, we've got Beatrix as a young girl was here. She's in like a basement cellar. She's feeding them. She's like taking out crusts of bread and just feeding the mouse, and starts off quite innocently, and then all hell kind of breaks out. You hear like a commotion and banging and all sorts of stuff, and then it culminates in blood dripping from the ceiling, and you actually see the mouse get dissected, you know, just dies on the spot and gets dissected. So it straight away leads that there's supernatural horror thing going on. It's more folk horror, this, obviously with a supernatural element, but yeah, that kind of sets the scene of that, and we'll come back to this a couple of times throughout the film, which isn't too bad. And then after that scene, we jump, it's like 30 years in the future. Beatrix, a grown woman, Beatrix it is. Once again, apologies for my pronunciation, I probably even got it wrong again. There's some people, honestly, they tell me their name and I pronounce it and they look at me and go, what the hell are you saying? I'm like, I'm saying it, honest. Or if I used to try Duolingo. It was fun me trying to play about with other languages, because it just kept going wrong. But hey, I'm me, that's who it is. Love it or leave it, you know, or laugh at me, you know, whatever. It's all good. But yeah, we've got her. She's in the future. She's become recently widowed. She moves back to the family home where this happens. Now, at the same time, there's kind of a dual plot. So there's like an archaeological team. Yeah, I'm well. I've only had a couple of sips, by the way. You know what I mean? Don't worry. I'm tripping over my own tongue here. Yeah, so we'll have a dig going on. And essentially what they're finding, find perfectly preserved woman. Now, in the UK, this is not an unknown phenomena throughout Europe, British Isles. They're known as bog people, particularly back in Ireland. A lot of like Donegal was a real proclivity for it, and some other places. But peat turf, if you're not familiar with, it's kind of the fuel before you get the coal. It's a strange one. So obviously how fossil fuels are made is the decomposition of plant and animal matter, and it compresses, and coal is busy over, you know what I mean, it's over thousands of years almost of decomposition and going through the process. So that's where you get the hard. But just before that, you've got peat. The funny thing about peat is it's still actually on the land. You know what I mean? You actually cut it out of the soil. We still use it back home. It's great for open fires. So you have a wood fire, you know, fire pit. You add a few peat turfs, and it's like throwing a few lumps of coal on. Now what you do is you have to let it dry out a bit first. You know what I mean? You can cut it directly from the ground, and you can almost use it that night. That was the thing. We used to go out camping, especially up the more mountains and stuff. You could certain places around Donard and that, you could actually go and actually cut the peat out of the side, and then just leave it nice, like summer, really nice and dry. So you just leave it when you're setting up your campsite to the side, and then usually by that night you've got the fire going, just set them on top. And what it does is, because wood, as you know, feeding the fire with wood is nigh impossible, to keep going. You have to be collecting for hours and hours to get a good fire going. But if you've got peat turf, chuck it on top, and fire will last all night. And really good embers as well, good for cooking on as well. Really unique smell. You'll never forget, if you smell peat turf burning, you'll never forget it. If you're ever over in Northern Ireland, go to the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum or the American Folk Park, and they have old style cottages, and they've actually got peat fire. Every cottage has peat fire going, and they actually cook on it. They show traditional cooking, like soda bread and farls and stuff. And honestly, once you get that smell of peat turf, you don't forget it. And it's the same here in Netherlands. It's all pretty similar, and it's unique to the geography, if that makes sense. But another thing about it is it's a really good preservative. So back to the bog people, they're still being discovered today. So it's actually based in sort of fact. People are still being found, perfectly preserved, who've been murdered. They've been tied up, they've been killed, and then they've been buried in the bog. Because don't forget that these are European swamplands, would be the equivalent. Obviously, climate changes and landscape changes over time, but originally these would have been swamps. It's the equivalent. We actually still have swampland in parts of the British Isles and Europe. And there's still swampland there, just not what maybe folks over in America and Canada might think of. It's just different ecosystem at the end of the day. But there've been people murdered, they've been buried, supposedly never to be seen again, and then sure enough, land changes, gets developed on, and then these people are being dug up, and I think some murders have actually been solved. That's how crazy it is. The people have been dug up and have actually still got DNA evidence and stuff on them, because the peat preserves them that much. It's really, really fascinating. I know I'm going off on a wee bit of a tangent, but it is relating to the plot, I promise you, because that's what kicks this whole thing off. The excavation, that they find basically a woman, and of course to go through the process of removing her from, basically they take a solid block out of the ground, she's in it, and that's kind of part of the investigation that goes on. What happened to this woman. Now, it's not a criminal investigation, because obviously time has passed. It had been a recent body, different, but it's not. This is hundreds of years old, so it's not really something for the police at that point to get involved in. So obviously they make the authorities aware, but still, it's more just historical now. What you're looking at. So let's go on. What happens is, though, Beatrix is in the house with her parents, and all of a sudden this random bloke just appears. He's possessed. He's got that whole sign of being possessed or off his head and something. He effectively comes in and tries to kill her. Now, this doesn't make sense when we get to the sort of end of the movie, because it's kind of goes against the mythology. If that makes sense. So this is where maybe people have a problem with this movie, and it gets a wee bit confusing, because at the end of the day, what happens is set out in folklore. And this guy appearing possessed, supposedly doing the bidding, doesn't really make sense. Just kind of trying to kick things off early. But there you have it. He appears, freaks him out. Police get called. The father bops him in the back of the head, so he doesn't kill him. He's taken to hospital, and then Beatrix just starts wanting to find out what's going on, and that's where the whole sort of mystery start going. This in between this as well, you get the flashbacks back to her, and that scene at the beginning. That's why it plays a kind of pivotal role, because it's one of those unlocks what actually is going on. Bit of a slow burner. That's one thing. If you're expecting modern Hollywood horror, you're not going to get it here. If you're not comfortable with foreign language movies, you're not going to get it here either. Because the funny thing is, they're all speaking Dutch, but the excavation team, I think they're Romanian. No, the wee kids, they're kind of a mixed bunch. I think they might be Romanian. Some of them are Romanian anyway. And the other protagonist, Jonas, he's the basically head of the archaeological dig. Because they don't speak the same language, they use English as the sort of babel fish, to talk between them. So you have it in Dutch with subtitles. You then have them speaking English between each other, and then you have Jonas doesn't speak Dutch. So you've got, but English isn't his mother tongue, so to speak. So it's a strange thing to get your head wrapped around. Well, if you live anywhere else apart from Europe, because over here, especially in the British Isles, London, you've got every language going. Especially where I'm living at the moment, just in the outskirts of London, you have every language under the planet. And the fact is, which one do you learn? So everyone learns to speak English, and I've witnessed this myself. You've got people with different languages, all using English at different levels, and it's all trying to communicate. And then when you get talking to people, you might pick up a word here or there of a different language, and you kind of throw that in, and it's really interesting. It's amazing how people can figure out a way to communicate. It's one of the endearing qualities of the human race, if that makes sense. That somewhere, people think that languages are the proclivity of like scholars, and you have to formally learn languages. But there's people that can learn 7 languages, not even just by being in the right environment. Obviously, if you're a closed off environment and you don't speak other languages, it's a bit more tricky. But if you're surrounded by it, you can pick up. People always find a way to communicate, which is really cool. There's always a way to find common ground, gestures, words, and that's basically what happens throughout this movie. So it can be a bit jarring because all of a sudden you're focused in on the foreign language. You're keeping in touch with the subtitles, and then they switch to English, and then within the next scene they're switching back to Dutch. That's just, like I said, it's one of these you have to pay attention. Don't pay attention, you'll get lost very quickly. So it's not a popcorn flick. I suppose that's the best way to describe it. It's not a popcorn flick. You kind of have to in depth. Now, I should have watched it maybe a second time before doing this, but I thought I only watched it yesterday. May as well come on and just give like a fresh review, if that makes sense. What I thought. So we're starting to find out more about the bog lady. Turns out she's been murdered. Her throat's been slit, but it's been slit vertically as opposed to the way you normally see things happen. So it's very specific, and it become it's almost seen as ritualistic. That's not the normal way things are done. What it all comes down to is there's a whole mythology behind the village, and it's a folklore tale of Fika. Can't have it up here because there's a lot to it, and like I said, it's the same because every year they play this out. The tale of Fika. It's like a local legend. It's like telling the story of St. Patrick or St. George or St. Andrew. That's that kind of thing. Or Hansel and Gretel, Grimm fairy tales. You're familiar with those? It's like telling that, but it's specific to that region. I suppose if Cameron here, he would say the Wendigo would be his local sort of legend that they tell a tale of. That's that sort of thing. Everywhere has some sort of story that resonates, like I'm also Scots, so like the tale of Colin, and is old and trusted, those sort of things. There's really regional specific tales that you can get into the mythos of, and it kind of shapes the village then, because then that tale shapes your rituals, it shapes personality, kind of shapes your culture, and that's what we're seeing here. The culture's kind of around it. It's not a conspiracy theory type thing, so if you're thinking like The Wicker Man, it's not like that. So don't go and expect that sort of vibe. I mean, it's not all about the whole village plotting against people. It's actually really clever the way he's done it. Like it's just the way the story's told. You have to pay attention, or else you miss the whole point, and that's kind of the tricky part about it. So you can't really just sit popcorn flick, and go and just get the story spoon fed to you. I think a foreign language, but unless you speak Dutch, kind of feeds in that as well. You have to be like watching it. But essentially, what was it? So the folklore of Fica, was a king named Walter. He was defeated by a slave. Basically had a relationship with a slave named Fica. He got her pregnant, and Walter's wife Helen was furious. So it was one of those. He was the king. Obviously, had bed chambermaids. She went along with it, but I think once she became pregnant, that's where things changed. Then she became a threat. With lineages and stuff. Helen then accuses Fica of witchcraft. So spreads around the village. She gets charged, and then that's what we're going to do. Basically, burn her at the stake. So this is played out by. It's actually for a school play. It's a bit rough to be played out, and I don't see 2022 Western audiences playing out these. But folklore always was like Ring of Rosies was based on the plague, and there's like loads of fairy tales and that are really dark, and there are warnings at the end of the day. I think I've talked about this. Horror is sort of a warning. Don't stray off the path. Be careful. It's always that's kind of the whole point. There's almost a moral tale, especially with modern movie. Since the 80s and stuff. It's all about your virtuousness and don't play around, that sort of thing, that you get yourself into bother, which is true to us. And you can live your life a certain way, but you have to also accept responsibility for what you do. And if you're not careful, you get yourself into bother. That's life. But horror just takes it to the extreme, and that's what the kind of does here. I think it's the whole tale of careful who you mess with. She's messing with somebody's husband, whether or not who's powerful and jealous, and that's could have been just a straw that broke the camel's back. Her getting pregnant was just all the upending of all this frustration that she had. So they're the girl getting burnt at the stake. That's essentially what happens. So what it is, she this is way back. This is played out. It's kind of ties into the plot. So you don't get this bit, you'll kind of miss the whole point of the movie. But Fica prays to God, so to speak, and to get her out of it. But it's Moloch, an ancient pagan god, that answered her. Moloch, I think, as well appears in Christian mythology, and I think he's featured in Leviticus. I think it's to do, it's against burning. I think it's child sacrifice and burning sacrifices. It's kind of a warning against that. That's personification. I haven't really got too much into it, but this day anyway, Moloch, he approaches Fica, essentially says, it's like making a deal with the devil. Yes, I'll save you, but you'll owe me, and this will go on forever, so to speak. She agrees because she's that enraged that she's got herself in this position, because essentially she was a slave first of all, making the best of her situation, gets the eye of Helen, and then she's going to die an unjust death, so to speak, because of jealousy. It's one of those you can't win. It's almost like a Greek tragedy. There's no heroes. Nobody wins because it's all just capriciousness of humanity. And that's you don't see too much of this now. That's all swept under the carpet now in modern movies. There's a cynicism about humanity, but also it's done very black and white. So it's good to see something like this. Deals with capriciousness of humanity and how people are and what people are prepared to do, and the strength of emotion. Anger, jealousy. That's why you don't deny those emotions, because they're just as powerful as love and caring and protectiveness. An emotion is emotion, emotion can have the same intensity and can either spray to be the positive or negative reaction. That's why these folk tales are really fascinating, because they do delve into that, in simpler times, so to speak, and spell it out, and it's good to sort of revisit this from time to time. So, what he does, he says there'll be a catch if she agrees. It will come at a cost. Basically, the price would be her unborn child. But Ficca agrees anyway, and he says it's basically the curse would then repeat itself, the unborn generations. So that's where the whole thing comes along, that it's going to carry on even after her death. So, back to Patrick again in modern times. She's sort of researched into this. Another 11 bodies are discovered as well, which kind of kicks us all up a gear. So it's very slow and atmospheric, and then it's after the scene in the school where they're playing out this folk tale and explaining things, where everything kind of ramps up a level, and then it's discovered another 11 bodies, and they've all been killed in the same way. Basically, their throats slit vertically, so it's ritualistic. This is where we find out it's a 30-year cycle. So think Stephen King's that, it's every 30 years this cycle repeats itself. We then get, I think we get a revisit back to young Patricia back in the cellar. So essentially, she's hiding while her grandmother is getting killed or dying. That the whole thing's going on. We don't see what happens really, because it's done through the eyes of a child, but we know that her grandmother died, and it was that instance where it happens. Really could have maybe been explained a bit better, or went a bit slower. Like I said, it's one of these blink and you miss it, so if you're not paying attention, you kind of miss all this. I had to stop and go back a bit just to get my head around it, even when I was watching. So things culminate. So, was there someone else came into the house? God, I can't remember now. Basically, they're under threat that someone else is going to come to the house. Patrick's father starts laying traps, so he's putting out bear traps and stuff, and then almost like fairy traps. The twine with the bells that ward off. That was an old way to ward off spirits, but it's basically to let people know that someone was coming. He had set up a camera, and people were approaching the house, but it wasn't showing up anything. The images were coming out blank, so he went kind of old school. We then start to see people approach the house, and then Patrick's father gets taken over. This is where it gets confusing, because in the tale, Moloch's made the agreement that this will carry on throughout generations, but we also have Ficca kills herself by slitting her throat vertically, and she enters Helen's body. Helen's soul gets displaced and roams as a vengeful spirit. That's from the fairy tale. This is where, correct me if I'm wrong, this is where it's a bit confusing. I might have picked it up wrong, but that's where it's not clear. Is this Moloch, or is it Helen's spirit that's causing this? So we'll start to look at this here. Next thing we know, Patrick's father's been taken over by a spirit, and he's coming in now, basically to try and kill Patrick. Then we see the scene replay itself. So Patrick takes her daughter, puts her in the same cellar, and this is where we start to see the flashbacks of that's what happened to her when she was a child. Her mother put her in there. And then we start to see the thing played out. So basically, I think it might be the spirit of Helen is in the father. He goes to basically try and kill Patrick. She runs up to the bedroom, and then that's where we get the sort of switch, where basically Patrick's mother then flips, you see the eyes go white, and then she kills her husband. We then see a whole scene play out where we then find Patrick, she's tied to the bed, and her brothers are, and there's a whole bunch of entities behind her now. They might have been the archaeologists, because I think they're the ones that are most affected. But we see the archaeologists, or people dressed up as Moloch, so to speak, in effigies. Her mother then kills herself in front of Patrick. Patrick's tied to the bed. Then we see the operation of Moloch, I do believe. No, we see Ficca because we missed that part in the sort of retelling of the folklore. The symbol of Moloch gets burned onto Ficca's head when she makes a deal, and this kind of all plays out. I need to watch it again. I think you need to watch this a couple of times to get your head around. Once just to watch it and get the experience, and then another to actually break down the folklore, because it's just there's two elements to it. There's a Moloch element and then there's a Helen element, and I'm not too sure myself how this culminates. I think Helen's trying to prevent the cycle continuing, or it might be Helen is the entity. Throwing her into the mix is a bit confusing, but essentially what happens is we see the scene. The reincarnation of Ficca appears. All really well done, by the way. This thing isn't laden with special effects, so when they do that scene, it's actually quite well done. If you think, was it that BC movie Enchantress out of Suicide Squad? Similar sort of makeup done, so nothing unique, but worked. Worked for this movie. We then jump ahead in time. Patrick meets up with Jonas again because he's a bit of a non-character. He's kind of just there to have things explained to him. He's running the dig. They kind of having it forever. It's not really plot worthy, if that makes sense. He attempts to save her, but he doesn't because he doesn't reach her in time. So at all, he almost couldn't have been there. His character didn't serve any major purpose. There was enough actually with the atmosphere, and this is where maybe people have a problem with the movie and it gets a bit disjointed because it's not your traditional, oh, here's a chance to stop the thing. It's just going through the cycle, and the other characters that almost become superfluous because you could almost tell us with less people and just this thing getting discovered. I think that's where it gets overcomplicated. But we jump on. Patrick and Jonas meet up. He tries to get her to move away with her, but she doesn't. She moves back. She's moved back to the family home where this all took place, and that's where the kind of reveal happens. Spoilers, by the way, if you don't want to find out how the movie ends. But essentially, Patrick's sitting there with her daughter, reading her story, and then we see these apparitions appear. And one of the operations is Patrick herself as a spirit, which is really strange. And then you see all these women behind, so it's essentially all the lineage of Ficca. That's kind of the whole point. They're all as ghosts. When they look in the window, they don't see Patrick, they see the apparition disguised as her. So essentially what's happening every 30 years is the body of the mother's being displaced. So I think when the grandmother gets to a certain age and the body's about to fail, 30-year cycle, that's when she sacrifices herself to basically pass into her daughter's body and kick the spirit out, who then joins the other ones. Then you've got the daughter who's basically, she's going through the same cycle again, so in 30 years time she'll have a daughter and the same thing will happen. But the bit I can't figure out is it Moloch who's taken over? is it Fika or is it Helen? Because that's the bit that threw me when they mentioned that Helen goes around as a vengeful spirit. So is Fika the one that's basically living on throughout her own descendants? There's a wee tale throughout talking about her. Patrick talks about her mother stealing sugar packets, and in that scene where she meets up with Jonas again, she next has sugar packets, so it kind of gives a bit of a hint that something's not right. So I don't know, because the bit about between essentially male character turning up trying to kill her. It didn't necessarily have to be male, but it was two men anyway. It was that original guy from the dig, and there was a tramp that killed himself, which I don't even know how that figured in. I even forgot that just to now. He's called the Bagman. He basically digs himself a grave and lies in it and dies, and that made no sense. So the archaeologist that turned up tried to kill Patrick, and then her father, who's possessed, turned up and tried to kill Patrick. That's possibly the spirit of Helen trying to stop this, or Fika is the one who's trying to end the cycle so her family can have peace. It can kind of be interpreted two ways. The movie's pretty new, so there might be a few theories and maybe interviews later on will explain it, but that's my kind of take. Essentially, this cycle's going on as per the agreement between Fika and Moloch, that this every cycle, the living, the relative will be, the descendant, will be possessed, and essentially their soul kicked out, and then these souls will collect, and it's supposed to be for all eternity as a punishment. But I don't know, is it Helen? Because when you look at the thing at the end, is it Helen's the one that's displacing the bodies, or is it Fika? That's the bit I can't figure out. If you know yourself, please leave it in the comments. Like I said, it'd be interesting to talk about it and see where we're going. But all in all, an enjoyable movie. It really was. It's a standalone. I don't think this would benefit for a sequel or anything. It just kind of would ruin it. And it's good as a standalone movie, which is what we need again. The sort of filmmaking machine, and it's good it's not Hollywood as well. Everything's focused on franchises and making about 20 sequels or something, but standalone movies are good. It's good to have a contained story, and it's also good to have things not spelled out, because then we can just talk about it and discuss it, and we can think about it. And even as I'm giving this review, I'm not afraid to admit I'm not 100% sure what exactly it is. I kind of know the premise. I know from the, like they said, the folklore tale, how the cycle's carrying on, but the characters, I'm not 100% sure how they fit in. I'm happy with that. It'd be cool to find out later on, but that's the part of watching movies, and that's the part of reading books as well. You mightn't always get. I think books are more descriptive though, so you can always get things explained. But a movie doesn't have that much time to explain everything to you, and that's good, because it means you're still thinking about it. I'm still mulling over without watching it again. What was going on. That's how you know you enjoy a movie. If you're still thinking about it, and you don't mind watching it again to find out what's happening. Cool, job done. So all in all, I enjoyed it. Like I said, just be aware it's not 100% in English, so got to be ready to read a few subtitles, which personally I don't have a problem with. It's an interesting experience. It's good to get something, because, like I said, the reason I do this channel, the reason I look at horror as well, I'm bored with Hollywood. I like independent movies. I like independent creators, because you get to see something different, something that steps away from the beaten track. So if you're prepared for that there, you'll enjoy this movie. If you like folklore and figuring out mysteries, you will as well. It's not an overly complicated one, but it's not spelled out 100% like straight there. It's not a paint by numbers. Cinematography, really good. They do well the whole setting, almost Hammer horror vibe to it, with the mist engine. Use it, and don't overuse it, and the music isn't overpowering, so you're not sitting getting blasted with like creepy music. It doesn't rely on jump scares, so it's not about that. it's the almost oppressive environment. You know that something's about to come to boat and there's danger, and you kind of get that feeling. And I think that was done really well. But there you go. That's pretty much the review. So let me know what you think in the comments. And until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.